Squares, square roots, cubes, and cube roots. To square a number, multiply it by itself. For example, 1 squared is 1 times 1, 2 squared is 2 times 2, 3 squared is 3 times 3, and so on. 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, etc. are known as perfect squares. Some other examples are 0 squared, which is 0. And if you multiply a negative number by itself, you end up with a positive result. For example, negative 6 times negative 6 equals positive 36. A square root goes the other way. For example, the square root of 1 equals 1, the square root of 4 equals 2, the square root of 9 equals 3, and so on. Basically, you take a look at the number inside of the square root symbol and think to yourself, what times itself will equal 4? What times itself will equal 9? What times itself will equal 16? And so on. Let's try a few other examples. The square root of 0 does equal 0. What about the square root of 10? What times itself equals 10? Well, it's not a whole number. If you type the square root of 10 into your calculator, you'll get 3.162, etc. This is an irrational number. One more example, the square root of a negative number. So the square root of negative 1 is not a real number. The reason the square root of a negative number is not a real number is because you cannot take any number, multiply it by itself, and get a negative result. For example, 4 times 4 equals positive 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is still positive 16. So no matter what, when you take a number times itself, your result will be positive, with the exception of 0. 0 is neutral. To cube a number, just use it in a multiplication 3 times. In other words, a number times itself times itself. For example, 0 cubed is 0 times 0 times 0, 1 cubed is 1 times 1 times 1, 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, and so on. The perfect cubes are 0, 1, 8, 27, 64, 125, and so on. A cube root goes the other direction. For example, the cube root of 0 equals 0, the cube root of 1 equals 1, the cube root of 8 equals 2, the cube root of 27 equals 3, and so on. In other words, what times itself equals 8? That's 2. What times itself equals 27? That's 3, and so on. Let's try some other examples. The cube root of 20. What times itself equals 20? It's not a whole number. If you type the cube root of 20 into your calculator, you get 2.714, etc. Let's try the cube root of a negative number. For example, the cube root of negative 64. This is possible, unlike a square root, because you can have a negative times a negative times a negative equal a negative. So in this particular case, the answer is negative 4 because negative 4 times itself does indeed equal negative 64.